Hello and welcome back to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. It's our goal to help create better, more knowledgeable HVAC and building performance technicians so they can execute their work, making customers happy in the homes they live in and the buildings they work in. Today's podcast, Eric and I get to chat with Lisa White, who is Associate Director of PHIUS. She explores the evolving world of passive building and shares her journey to building science, her role at PHIUS, and how the organization has grown from a niche movement into a force that is shaping multifamily and affordable housing projects across North America. She tells us about the core principles of passive building that are thermal, air, and solar or radiation control, and how they translate into healthier, more comfortable, and more resilient spaces. Got a lot of nice back and forth dialogue through the course of the podcast about that topic. She also talks about PHIUS's training and certification programs and the importance of third-party verification and how tools like WUFI Passive and PHPP help guide the design decisions. We also get into the conversation on the challenges of balancing technical rigor with real-world implementation and the role of embodied or upfront carbon in building standards development, and how passive building not only benefits owners and occupants, but also the broader environment. Extracted a few quotes from the episode from Lisa. The details matter, but it's the greater goal and intent behind them that truly counts. Another one, passive building isn't about eliminating systems, it's about reducing the dependency on them. And then one quote that Eric Kaiser brings up from our friend Robert Bean, design around people, a good building follows. And in a very thoughtful follow-up email, Lisa shared another thought about advice to her younger self. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. While it's easy to get caught up in minor details, it's better to start by doing better and improving on that over time than to be held up trying to be perfect at the onset, as well as never pass up on an opportunity to educate yourself or to collaborate with others. And she has learned that the best things come out of collaborative and open-minded conversations. So let's get into our conversation with Lisa White from PHIUS, talking about details matter, but so does the big picture.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Building HVAC Science Podcast. Eric Kaiser here, the great Bill Spohn, Overkill Bill right over there. And we've got a special guest here today, Lisa White from over at PHIUS. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
Lisa, you spoke with Eric. Was it a past building science camp, something like that?
Building Science Summer Camp. Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
So why do you go to that?
Well, obviously for the educational content, but if you haven't heard of summer camp, it's a blend of really good, really niche experts talking about building science topics during the day, and then tons of networking, good food, good drinks, good conversations in the evening, every evening. So it's just a really fun, a different type of professional event. That's just a lot of fun, and you get to meet a variety of people that are really getting into building science from all different angles. So best way to describe it.
So that sounds, you have this smile on your face when you're saying that. So you really enjoyed it. So that probably lends towards the question, learning a little bit more about your personal background and journey up to this point.
Sure. So maybe I should start with not with who PHIUS is. I guess PHIUS, the organization, has brought me a lot to where I am at this point. So I began there in 2012. Prior to that, I began school as an engineer, but switched to architecture. And then after one studio on sustainable community development and urban development, I switched to environmental sustainability and really focused my education on learning about renewables and about sustainable design. And then later pursued a master's in energy engineering, which was a little bit about the building demand side of everything and a little bit about energy generation and power generation, and then about all the infrastructure in between that. So power exchange works from utility perspective and policy. So I come to the building science field from broadly the efficiency side of things, the building efficiency side, but really what we do at PHIUS is really trying to deliver high performance construction, and that you have to look at all elements of building. We're very focused on enclosure. So there's a lot of elements a lot of individuals at the Building Science Summer Camp that are involved in all elements of the building enclosure, from the littlest pieces to the broadest building design.
Can you decompose that acronym for our listeners? PHIUS.
PHIUS, yeah.
It flows easily for us, but maybe not for everyone. Yeah.
I'm like, what acronym? So we recently rebranded. It is. So technically now we use it as a word, but it was previously the Passive House Institute US. That's what we are, but we've rebranded to PHIUS as the word because we have gotten a little bit passive building or passive house. And the passive house, people thought you could only do this to single family homes, or passive building only applied to single family homes. So we really tried to switch the verbiage to passive building because what we do applies to all building typologies. Technically, it's really just a set of principles that can reduce energy needs in any type of building. So it's not just house. So
some of our listeners might be familiar with the term passive house or with PHIUS, but you mentioned those principles, so core principles. Can you give us an overview what they are?
So I mentioned we're very focused on the enclosure at PHIUS. So when we're talking about the passive building principles, we're talking about principles that you apply to reduce or conserve energy in a building that keep paying back. It's not an efficiency of an equipment, it's a passive measure. So with the enclosure, there's high performance or continuous insulation around the outside of the building enclosure. So that's like climate appropriate thicknesses of insulation, generally more than code would require. And then also making sure that's continuous and any thermal bridges or lack of continuity is addressed in the enclosure. Alongside that is climate appropriate windows. So generally, again, higher performing windows than would be required by code. Often triple pane, sometimes double pane, depending on the construction and the climate for the windows. And then paying attention to how those windows are installed in the building too. So it's really thinking about the enclosure holistically, high performance enclosure. And that brings thermal control to the building. So just to backtrack, there's thermal control, air control, and radiation control. That's the buckets I think of them as. So thermal control is thermal control in the enclosure that I just described. Air control is a combination of air control in the enclosure by providing air tightness, so detailing the enclosure to make all of the connections airtight. And then because you make the enclosure airtight, providing this intentional balanced ventilation through intentional openings with filtered fresh air coming, or not fresh air, outside air coming through. So it's a new thing.
It's a real thing, though.
It is a real thing. I have to catch myself continually. But bringing in outside air through filtration intentionally at low flow rates and extracting from stale places in the rooms or in the buildings. So sealing up the whole enclosure and then providing that outside air intentionally. So it's controlling the air. And then radiation control, or really solar control. It's considering climate appropriate shading, allowing more solar gain when you want it, less when you don't. That's maybe more what people think about with passive building is big awnings and shading and vines and things like that, which is still part of it, but it's that's a little more passive solar 70s look at things like thermal mass, glass, and shading, where it's really just a balance of controlling thermal air and radiation in the building into kind of a sweet spot. And what we look for at PHIUS is a sweet spot in investment in these measures to conserve energy that pays back.
It's passive, but it almost sounds like it's not 100% passive because you're still going to have some mechanical systems in here to bring in this outdoor air to filter the outdoor air, right?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. So passive building does not mean that there's no active systems. So the passive part of the ventilation system is the recovery core. So we're bringing in that outdoor air and extracting the indoor air, and that air passes through a heat recovery or moisture recovery exchanger that is basically capturing the energy in one stream of air and transferring it to the other in the way that benefits the building or reduces the load on the building from bringing in that outdoor air. So there's a fan. That's the active part of it. The passive part of it is the core of the ventilation equipment. And then I should just mention too that almost all these buildings have heating and cooling systems. So we're not eliminating the need for heating and cooling. We're just significantly reducing the dependency on those systems and significantly reducing the amount of energy needed to heat and cool buildings to maintain the same level of comfort as a typical building.
So beyond principles, is there a certificate or something you can earn once it's been proven you've achieved certain dimensions?
So we have a building certification program. Well, first, at PHIUS, we set the standards and what it means to be certified as a passive building. And then we will also be third-party certification body for those standards. So yeah, there's a certificate, a plaque, all those things, but it's a lot more than that. I'd like to say it's a lot more than that. It's really a integral process throughout design and construction. It's not just somebody goes on site and fills out a piece of paper afterwards and makes sure everything passes. It's really an involved process.
So is there somebody from PHIUS that's involved with that construction process and overseeing it, or do you have like third-party people that are certified to do that?
Yeah, so it's third-party people that are certified to do it. So the certification process itself is really two parts. There's the design certification, which is all in-house with PHIUS reviewers, reviewing plan sets, energy models, specifications, all at a desk, reviewing ideally before construction starts on a building. And then we, as PHIUS, will issue design certification on the building. And then once design certification is issued, that's when we say, okay, you can begin construction to this design. And then we train and certify professionals that will be involved in the quality assurance inspections throughout the construction process that then bring their findings basically back to us at PHIUS. There's a set list of requirements and things that they're looking at throughout the entire construction process. They'll bring that back to PHIUS. We will review that and then issue the final certification.
What army of people are doing this work? Are they located regionally? The construction QA.
Yeah, they're located all over the country. So there's actually a lot fewer of these professionals than design professionals or even construction professionals that are certified through us or trained through us. The verification professionals are a little bit more difficult to track down, but it's basically for residential construction built off the ResNet HERS Rater network. You're familiar with that? Yeah. So anything residential, that's a prerequisite to that professional becoming a PHIUS certified rater or verifier.
Got it. Makes sense to stack those credentials.
Yeah.
In the certified homes that have passed through all the steps, is there a directory? Did I hear that correctly? And like how many are in the directory?
Yep. There's an online database, and this is a big range. I'm going to say somewhere between 600 and 1,000. But total certified, I'd say, is about 500 to 600 is my guess, total buildings. But that's buildings in terms of units. It's thousands. It's our multifamily construction. There's 563 fully certified projects right now. And then if you include the projects that have also the design certification issued, you're up to a little over 1,000. And then we also show all the registered projects, where that's another about 500. You're up to about 1,600. So not terribly huge. We are a fairly new organization, and a lot of our growth has been in the past 5 years. A lot of it uptake with multifamily construction, particularly affordable multifamily construction. A lot of that, I think, driven by policies and the inclusion of passive building and incentive programs and in low-income housing tax credit applications, where developers will get more points to get funding if they pursue passive building or include that in their designs. There's been these different facets that have sparked or ignited growth in different regions.
If you don't achieve a level of certification, doesn't mean you have a bad house.
No, absolutely not. And that's a really good point too. So throughout my years of PHIUS, I was a trainer for our design professionals, our PHIUS certified consultants. And a lot of the people that we trained say they took away so much from the training, and they know how to take these concepts and deliver them on every single project that they do moving forward. Like they can't go back. You can't think of it another way, but they're not certifying every single project. I think any of what you can apply with passive building can make the building better. What we're trying to do with the standards with PHIUS is really create this holistic thing where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. You are getting that synergistic effect of this balance between what you're doing with the enclosure, with the mechanical system efficiencies, and really with the quality that we're trying to deliver with this third-party quality assurance and certification process. So we want to make sure people aren't just asking for a good building and hoping. Like this really embeds the quality in the process of design, construction, and tries to do it in a way that minimizes risk, I guess, or sets you up for success the best. Gets the right questions asked early in the design, make sure things are going well throughout construction, and then tests after final construction is over to make sure you're getting the product that you want, rather than saying it's good on paper.
And I think Eric will agree with this. A lot of the forums, the social media posts and groups we're in, a lot of these questions come up about thermal, air, and radiation. I think it's nice to point the holistic or the North Star and saying, this is where it all comes together. If you can reach those standards, but maybe you go there, you get partway there, but you're doing better. I really like the idea of risk reduced because it's turned into a practice versus just being a statement. It's an actual practice.
I think that's a big part of what the professionals that take our training and deliver these buildings come out of it with is they've changed the way they deliver buildings in a better way.
So that makes me curious. What training are you offering for professionals if they want to go do this, want to go learn more? Where can they go to get that?
Broadly, we offer professional credentialing training for everyone involved in the building delivery process, or like the practitioners. So we have our PHIUS certified consultant training, which is typically aimed at those in the design, architects, engineers, those maybe energy consultants involved early in the design. We have our PHIUS certified builder training, which is aimed at contractors, so those actually on the ground, GCs, those delivering the buildings that are all boots on the ground focused on construction. And then we have our training for quality assurance professionals, which is the rater and verifier we were just talking about, building upon the ResNet HERS rating training. And then last year, we actually introduced 2 new trainings. One other professional credential training, which is called our Trades Professional Enclosure Specialist. I said we had the PHIUS certified builder training. That's a little broader, more project management, quality management throughout the process. Whereas the trades is really getting into material compatibility and like process and a lot more hands-on and into the weeds with the actual elements of construction. So we've delivered that a few times, and that is a almost fully classroom-based and building a mock-up type of thing, whereas our PHIUS certified builder training is less hands-on than that. And then the other training we introduced last year is not a professional credential, but it's a certificate program that is called Passive Building Foundations. And that's really aimed at those that need to or want to be part of the conversation about passive building, but aren't going to be the architect, the engineer, the builder. It might be the developer, a homeowner, a real estate agent, someone that needs to understand more of what's in passive building. What does certification mean? It does get into building science because we think that's really important, but just the basics of building science and sets you up to have informed conversations about passive building without actually being the one executing design or construction or verification.
Nice. And that entry-level certification program that I guess it sounds like that really gives somebody the jumping off point. Like if they want to go deeper, they can learn a lot more. They can speak intelligently about it. How long does something like that take to complete?
The foundations?
Yeah.
10 hours, 10 to 12, 10 to 15. It's all self-guided online. So it depends on the learner and how quickly you go through the content. But that's about what it's aimed at.
So they're going to take some online courses, probably have to read, watch some content maybe, and then take a test at the end to be able to do that.
Yep, exactly.
Very nice.
This is all visible on your website?
Yes. If you go PHIUS.org, there's an education drop-down across the top. And in that, you'll see all trainings, and it'll talk about our professional credentialing, the foundations training. And then we have other training that supports the individual professionals. So we have energy modeling training, we have therm training, other stuff, a little deeper, more into the weeds. We have a building certification workshop, really getting into the weeds on how to do certification. So other more supportive trainings, but high level, it's those professional credentialing trainings.
There's an acronym, a couple acronyms. You mentioned therm. There's another one that is not a Star Wars character. WUFI.
What did I say?
No, you didn't say it.
Oh, WUFI, yeah.
Can you explain WUFI and therm?
Yeah, absolutely. So WUFI stands for basically heat and moisture transiency in German. So I'm not even going to try to say it in German, but it is an acronym. It is a software family, and PHIUS uses WUFI Passive, which is one component or one piece of the software family that does whole building energy modeling. We use that as our compliance tool for building certification. So when we set performance standards for the buildings, we set performance targets that can be verified in that tool. So that's when we're teaching energy modeling, when we're reviewing energy models for compliance with our standards, that's what we're using, WUFI Passive. It also has WUFI Pro, which a lot of professionals involved in the building enclosure might be more familiar with, which is a component-based assessment tool, which is looking at heat and moisture transfer across, say, just a roof or just a wall. WUFI Passive is looking at whole building, and more of an energy balance across a whole building. And WUFI Pro is zooming in on specific heat and moisture transfer throughout a wall to assess for hygrothermal risk or issues of mold accumulation over time, moisture accumulation over time, something like that. So the same developer, Fraunhofer Institute of Building Physics, but different tool, different outcome, different use cases.
And there's one more tool I'm familiar with, the PHPP.
Oh, PHPP. Okay.
Yeah. Can you expand that acronym and explain it?
Yes. So the PHPP acronym stands for Passive House Planning Package. This is the tool used by the Passive House Institute in Germany. In terms of functionality, the output is very similar to what you're getting with WUFI Passive, the tool that PHIUS uses. It's a whole building energy balance. You're trying to find heating, cooling loads, heating, cooling annual demands, and total energy use with a bunch of inputs. The primary difference is one, that's used by the German organization, but two, PHPP is an Excel-based tool. So it's essentially just a large workbook. Similar inputs, like inputting everything about the enclosure and mechanical system and efficiencies and all of that, but a very different interface than what we use with WUFI Passive for PHIUS. But similar, you're trying to find an energy balance, whole building energy model.
When we were designing the house we live in, which is not passive, but has many of the elements of passive built into it, I hired someone to do a PHPP model at the early stages so we could get an idea of where we were trending with all these parameters.
Yeah, and they are design tools. So that is another thing about WUFI Passive is you can quickly make design decisions or at least see your impact of design. Like say you want to change your window from this window to this window. Just plop in the new one and you can immediately see the impact on predicted energy use or predicted heat load or whatever you're focused on.
We played around with the solar heat gain coefficients and insulation levels and things like that to try to iterate very quickly. I mean, it was a matter of just hours to find out what our sweet spot was.
Really great design tool. Yeah. Which is also fairly different than most compliance tools, which are like put your information in, spit out your report or whatever you need and like stamp. It is really supposed to help guide design. The tool in conjunction with the standards is really what we say guides the design. Because if you don't know what you're aiming for as outputs in the tool, then it's not really guiding you to make any particular decisions. So that's where the standards come in.
So how many different standards do you have under the PHIUS umbrella?
Really, I would say two. Two conceptually. We have PHIUS Core and PHIUS Zero. Core is basically applying all the good passive building best practices we talked about to reduce heating and cooling loads in buildings and to reduce total energy consumption. And it ties in all of the quality assurance elements we were talking about with the third party site verification, which I should also mention for residential, builds upon all of the pre-existing programs that we have here, like Energy Star, Zero Energy Ready Home, and EPA and OR Plus. So it's really, we have this graphic on our website called the High Performance Staircase. We're building upon that. So we're just going further with all of those programs and just pushing a little bit farther with enclosure efficiency, a little farther with mechanical efficiency, reducing loads even further than those programs. But we don't want to forget about any of the best practices integrated in those programs. So we built upon good programs that people understood and already existed. Sorry for that tangent, but Core is basically applying all those really good things to the building and reducing energy use to the level that we've prescribed. Typically 40 to 60% reduction from code construction, but that totally depends on where you are and what your baseline code is. So it could be less. It could be 20 to 60, let's say. Somewhere with a really good code, you're not going to get 50% reduction. The other level is PHIUS Zero, which is basically taking the building to PHIUS Core levels and then using on-site or off-site renewable energy to net out the annual predicted energy use to zero. So you can put PV on the roof. There's also options for off-site like renewable energy credits or power purchase agreements or anything like that to get to zero. We do have both of those options under new construction and a retrofit program. Our retrofit program, we did just release a brand new version in 2024. The framework is completely different than new construction. So I should maybe start. New construction is a performance-based standard for the most part, where you're aiming to meet these certain heating, cooling load, and demand values in an energy model. You're aiming to have a total energy consumption under a certain number. And again, this is all like compliance in an energy model or through a prescriptive path. But we're essentially guiding how far to go with the enclosure with cost optimization. So we set these performance targets based on if you improve the enclosure a little bit more, you save a little bit more. And over time, there's a sweet spot where if you keep investing, you're not saving anymore. So we did this really large optimization study to set these performance targets. And then there's two paths for that, performance or prescriptive. So there is a prescriptive path, but it's really guiding you in the same way and from the same optimization study of cost optimization over time. That's the heart of the standard. In the new retrofit standard, we've shifted the framework where the enclosure, the investment in the enclosure is guided by outage resilience. So rather than thinking about cost and energy savings over time, it's thinking about how long you can maintain, I don't want to call it livable, but livable, survivable temperatures that we've set on the interior without the power grid up. So during an outage, how long can you be survivable during the winter and summer? It's not survivable. It's not a life or death line, but you can stay there. You can maintain conditions where your pipes aren't freezing. And if you, in the winter, and if you open windows in the summer, you maintain livable conditions.
Somewhat livable and somewhat comfortable then.
Yeah, like you don't have to leave your home during these outages. That's really what guides the enclosure. We decided that's what's really what we don't want to give up with passive building with existing buildings. It's less about cost because retrofits cost-wise might not pencil in many cases anyways. Like it's really not cost driving that decision. And then with total impact, we use like total energy use for new construction. Total impact for retrofit, we're looking more holistically, looking at basically CO2 equivalent, but including the embodied emissions or upfront emissions of the materials and also maintenance and also on the electric grid from use before and after the building, electric grid and natural gas. So whatever the power or the energy coming to the building is using. And then also the cost to upgrade the grid if you are electrifying your building by X. There's infrastructure required to do that. So it's just a more holistic number. And we're looking at what it was before. It's a total life cycle emissions value versus after the retrofit over, I think, a 50 or 80 year lifespan, maybe 80 years. It's just a whole different framework looking at different elements, but we do believe retrofit projects deserve a different way of looking at them and assessing them.
Did you mention how you look at the increasing costs of energy and how often does the model get updated and what basic resources are you looking at for that?
Yeah. So in the performance path, the construction that I had mentioned with the cost optimization, the optimization study gets redone every 3 years. And so we didn't redo the full optimization actually in 24, but we did pay attention to cost changes in like the cost database of materials and things. I think the last time the full optimization redone was 2021, but it is kind of a 3-year cycle. And the performance targets are climate specific. So if you are in Chicago, or I think someone who's in Indianapolis, you would go into this criteria calculator and pick Indianapolis. And that takes into account both your climate data, your specific climate data, as well as a statewide utility cost. So it's like a flat rate of electricity price. And that will get updated every 3 years. And obviously the higher the utility cost, the electricity cost, the more it would guide you to invest and conserve energy. So that it's taken into account in a very high level. It does absolutely impact the standards and the performance targets that you're hitting, but I wouldn't say it's looking at it in a way that it's not as nuanced. We understand utility prices could change every hour. They do in many locations, or it depends on your actual rate structure for your home or your building that you're connected to. But there is more nuance to it than that. But that's how they're incorporated right now.
You used a word a few minutes ago or a phrase a few minutes ago, which recently entered my vocabulary. I was wondering how long it's in yours. Upfront CO2?
Yeah. We hear it called either embodied or upfront, which is trying to, or there's one more. Some people call it embedded, which has the same, I think, issues as embodied. So we're just talking about the emissions from the manufacturing or extraction and manufacturing processes for materials that are going into buildings. And then there is embodied or upfront. There are emissions like that also during operations of the buildings, like with maintenance and swapping out of different equipment. And then there's also emissions that can be categorized like that at the end of the building life cycle. But yes, I think the industry is moving a little more toward upfront.
I heard it at summer camp this year for the first time. And that's where it stuck with me. And I was thinking it'd been talked about a lot beforehand, but not in my circles.
I've definitely heard it before that, yes.
I heard it again at summer camp, and there was a lot of talk about embodied carbon. And I always wondered, if we have embodied carbon, do we have disembodied carbon? So to me, that would actually describe the different types of carbon, right? It's the carbon that's stuck in the building, but then there's the stuff that's from outside the building that still applies to the building.
I don't know. We'll get there as an industry, but
as an industry, we'll figure something out. And everybody has their own nuances with acronyms and terminology sometimes that it can get confusing.
Yeah, there's even conflict as to what you include in a calculation for this upfront or embodied carbon. Nobody truly agrees on that, I don't think. So we'll get there.
Yeah. So some of these things can be a little squishy at times.
Absolutely.
How do you guys manage that when things are squishy as far as with what to put in your calculations?
As a certification and standard setting body, we have to make a stance on everything and set what we should use. If it's a calculation methodology or protocol for something, we just have to do our best to determine what we think is appropriate at this time. We do have a technical committee that is a broader group of subject matter experts across, North America and Germany that can help inform things like this with our standards. But for the most part, we have to make a stance and set a guideline for what everybody can use consistently, at least if it's part of the certification process.
And then publish what you put in there, of course, to make sure that everybody can be on the same page.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up too, because I want to make sure that I mention a big part of what PHIUS does is take in knowledge from all the projects that we see, take in questions, and then try to consolidate it into a useful way for the rest of the building community. So one thing that's like a huge part of what we do, and our website has a resource library with thousands of free resources, whether that's recorded webinars, technical articles, protocols on miscellaneous modeling things or energy use or predictors of whatever, window comfort calculators, whatever it may be. That's a really big, important part of what we do is trying to be that resource for the community. And that is a big benefit also. I mentioned earlier, not everyone certifies their buildings. Huge benefit of when people do bring buildings to us for certification, we get to learn from that. And we get to take that certified building and put information about it into our public database, and then you can learn about it. And so it's really a big part of what we do and a core part of meeting our mission too.
Here's another thing that I've looked at and watched over time, of course, being the nerd that I am, is how things change over time. You build the house and then you test the house and it's great up front. Does PHIUS do any long-term monitoring of these houses over time to say, are they holding up? Are they meeting the standards over time?
So we don't do any formal long-term assessment of the buildings, but we absolutely like to keep in touch with as many building owners or developers that will keep in touch with us in terms of giving actual performance data or monitored data on their buildings. So yes and no. Like it's not required as part of the certification process, but it's really valuable information for us to have. So we can continue to refine our standards and our assumptions and make our product the best that we can be so we can deliver the best buildings that we think they're capable of. So it's a work in progress. I don't think we will ever have something that requires long-term monitoring in the certification program because it's difficult enough to do it just from design through final construction in terms of getting the team on board and everything. But we have quite a few people that are really interested and devoted to what we're doing and what they're doing, that they will share good and bad about the building performance. And that helps us immensely. And I guess I should say with that too, we're undergoing a big data collection project right now this summer with all the existing projects or fully certified projects. But the latest project grab that we got We were comparing mostly total energy use to predicted energy use. And it came in 7% on average more energy use in these buildings than was predicted in the energy model. So we were pretty happy with that. That was a combination of all different building typologies and different climates. Not a huge sample set. I don't remember the exact number, but generally some were under and some were over. And some we had more refined data, say a 6 flat, we'd get unit 1A and unit 3B. And just the variation between those two could be 50% different. It's just like who lives in the building? What are they doing? Are they inviting all their friends over to do laundry? There's a lot of unique things that had nothing to do with the actual design that can come out in the actual monitored data. But one of the great things about passive building is it is squishing the variability in where that monitored end energy use can fall. Because if someone does keep their unit at 85 degrees in the winter because they're used to warm climates, it doesn't take as much energy to heat a really well-insulated apartment to 85 as it would to a code-built apartment. So we're reducing that, at least the fluctuation in the space conditioning needs for these buildings and the other needs if you're using high efficiency, like hot water heating equipment, things like that.
So that at the same time, it sounds to me like not only is this reducing energy usage, but it's also going to increase occupant comfort, which to me is a huge thing.
I mean, and it really should increase comfort with reduced energy use. Yeah.
I'm a big follower of Robert Bean's philosophy that design for premium comfort and energy use follows afterwards. And that, to me, that sounds like what this is going to arrive at is that it's going to be lower energy use and you're using energy as the scorecard, but it's going to deliver or should deliver really premium indoor comfort as well when it's finished.
Absolutely. And yes, PHIUS uses energy as the scorecard ultimately, but most people, I think, delivering PHIUS projects or selling their clients on PHIUS projects, or even when we talk to people that aren't practitioners, that's not what we're talking about. Like many people don't care about energy, or it's so small that it's not really on their radar. They pay a utility bill on auto pay and like, yeah, that's not really what I'm looking for. But when you start talking about delivering comfort, you start talking about delivering health, improved air quality. I know if you're both at summer camp this year, there's a lot of talks on indoor health and what that can actually do to occupants of a building. It's crazy when things go wrong, what can actually happen. So if you start talking about delivering these other benefits that I don't think many homeowners know they can even ask for, like asking for a healthy building, that's what people are looking for. And energy savings comes along with that, but that's not a driver for most. To me, that's one of the more exciting things about passive building is there's benefits along the way for almost everyone involved, right? Or everyone involved. So the owner does see reduced costs, reduced utility bills, but then whoever's occupying the building gets all the benefits of just a better building, better indoor air quality, more durability, lower maintenance issues, and the environment sees fewer emissions. So there's benefits for everybody along that building chain.
Very good. If you could go back in time to before you entered this field, what would you tell yourself with all the knowledge you have now, knowledge and experience?
That's a really good question. There's a couple of things. Maybe my earliest self, I would say the details matter, but they don't matter as much as you think they do. It's really, really easy to get hung up on, at least in the building certification world, on like minutia, like very little things that do, if stacked, do compound to bigger things. But there's always the need to zoom out and look holistically and broadly at what you're trying to accomplish. And remember that the details matter, but at the same time, the greater goal and the intent behind every detail is really what you should be focused on rather than every detail. So maybe that's my youngest self, because building a certification program and being involved in standards development, you have to focus on the details, but then the implementation part of that, there's a translation to real world that is really, really, really important. And that's still what we're focusing on at PHIUS, is getting this from, we know the science works. We're very confident in the science and the data and like the process, but getting that into how it fits into real world application and processes is still a challenge, and bringing the scientific benefits to a typical owner and allowing them to understand that and allowing them, empowering them to understand, like what I said, you can ask for comfort, you can ask for air quality. I think that's like, there's a huge monumental shift when people begin to understand that there are differences in buildings. And even people like close friends of mine that understand what I do that aren't in the industry, I think still don't understand that. There are differences in buildings. Most people just think a building is a building. It will keep rain out, and there's a long way to go there. So that's, yeah, maybe that's, I'm not sure if that's exactly what I'd tell myself, but that's more of a rant than anything. But maybe a better one here. I did start at PHIUS when we were a fairly small organization. I don't know how many projects we certified my first year there, but it was not a lot on both hands. It was more of a tree hugger community and like people that really cared about the environment that were interested in this. And now only 13 years later, we're seeing so much growth. So I guess I would just say, don't give up. There's so many like-minded individuals out there that are looking to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And although the building industry has so much inertia to do things the way it's always been done, that it's been really challenging over the years to try to just keep, I don't want to say pushing, but expanding the boundaries on that or pushing the edges on where we can. That I truly believe there's a lot of momentum going toward building better, and not just from people that care about energy and emissions, but that care about just making better buildings, making better spaces for occupants, and care about actually delivering health and comfort as like a human right. So there's a lot more out there. It will work. It's really not that hard to. Like passive building is not rocket science. Building better buildings is not rocket science by any means. It just takes a little bit of a shift in thinking, a little more attention to detail. And it's, like I said before, it delivers results for everybody involved. It delivers benefits for everybody involved.
A close friend of ours, Eric's, Brian Orr, has a phrase, I don't have to do this, I get to do this.
Yeah, there you go. It's been a really enjoyable career, but really enlightening and really different obstacles along the way. But it's crazy now to see how far the industry's come in just my short period of being involved. I'm really optimistic about where it can go.
Excellent.
Yeah, it feels kind of like a snowball to me, just where it started rolling down that hill and it's starting to grow and grow. And more people are like, oh, hey, that's an interesting snowball. Let's go check that out.
Yeah, I feel that way too. But I feel like I'm in that snowball. Like we're feeling that definitely as an organization.
Hopefully this podcast gets more people looking at the snowball.
Absolutely. That's the goal.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you too. This has been fun. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the Building HVAC Science Podcast. I think you know I'm also the host of the Res Talk podcast. You can learn more about the rapidly expanding world of home energy ratings and peripheral topics, and we actually refer to those in this podcast. So there's a lot of tie-ins here. If you like what you've heard and have not subscribed to the podcast, please consider doing so. And we encourage you to send us feedback and comments. No matter what platform you listen on, send us an email, marketing@truetechtools.com, TRUTECHTOOLS.com. The Building HVAC Science Podcast is a production of True Tech Tools Limited. In full disclosure, I'm the owner of True Tech. And the opinions voiced are those of my guests, my co-host, or myself, depending on who is speaking, of course. If you're in the market for tools or test instruments mentioned in the podcast, either directly or indirectly, take a look at what we offer at truetechtools.com, TRUTECHTOOLS.com. And you can use the offer code HVACBS for a nice discount. Well, thank you again for tuning in to our podcast, and we hope you'll be back next time to hear more of what we have to share about building HVAC science. Take care.